Good morning and welcome to this morning's presentation on advanced scheduling inside of Proven Job Management. Now, again, for those of you that may have come in late for this morning's presentations, just a quick FAQ before we get started. All attendees will be muted during the course of the sessions. I do encourage any attendee that if they have a question to please enter them in the chat box. I know that for some of these courses we will run short on time, so if your question does not get answered, do not worry. We will respond to it after the class concludes. All of these sessions will be recorded, so if you want to rewatch them, they will be posted probably sometime next week via Dropbox. And there will also be published guides based on the information we're covering. So I know specifically in this presentation, I have a list of things that were updated. I'm not probably going to go through the slide one by one. I'm actually going to take us through the live system. So if you want to go back and take a look at the release notes, I will include them in the presentation itself. So without further ado, let's take a look at the advanced scheduling updates in Proven Job Management, what we're calling V2. So again, we're going to be breaking this course into three main sections. I am going to be starting with a full review of the system, its functionality, and its features. We're then going to talk a little bit about how this ties into the Crawford job track system and what information will be shared back and forth. And then we're going to talk about what functionality will also be coming for the rest of the year in the advanced scheduling. Now, for some of us who are in this session, you may not know what advanced scheduling is. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the advanced scheduling, where you can find it and how it works. And then we'll jump into the update that is coming in the next month and a half. So starting off, I'm going to start from our main menu in Proven Job Management, and I'm going to take us starting off onto our work order screen. Now I know we're talking about advanced scheduling, but the premise of advanced scheduling inside of the Proven Job Management system is that it is based on the work orders that you have set up in the system. And a lot of times I'll have customers that'll come to me and say, Ryan, we don't use work orders. Can I still use advanced scheduling? Yes. Every time a job is created, regardless of whether you use work orders or not, the system will actually create a default placeholder work order inside your job in the web. This placeholder can be used inside of the advanced scheduling. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get into the nuts and bolts of how it works. Now, from the work orders screen, if I need to get to the advanced scheduling, I can either do so directly from this scheduling button here at the top, or I can jump into the advanced scheduling from our calendar view, which is just coming to our schedule and clicking on this advanced button to jump into the advanced schedule. Now, before everybody starts to freak out, this is actually the old advanced schedule, so don't worry, it's been updated. But what I wanted to talk about are the reason behind some of the changes, and of course, for some of you, not having ever used this module or not having seen it, I want to talk about where we kind of evolved the advanced scheduling from the initial view. So some of the problems that people had with the advanced scheduling, and I'm sure as you can probably see on your screen right now, we had very limited real estate, and certainly the amount of information that exists in the advanced scheduling was sometimes more than what the average user can see. So it made it very kind of clunky and hard to navigate when trying to go through this screen and figure out, where my work order information is, how do I find something, how do I search for something. It was very limited from a perspective of how we were able to use and navigate that tool. So flash forward, new advanced scheduling. And again, at first glance, you're probably saying to yourself, Ryan, this looks fairly similar to what I just saw. At first glance, you would be right. But one of the things that we made a change very early on in the advanced scheduling was this idea of white space. Nobody likes the white space. It is unused real estate. So how about we maximize the use of my screen? By clicking the new expand and collapse button, I now can full screen my schedule or my advanced schedule to see the whole view of what I'm using. Now, granted, from my perspective, I'm on a super wide double monitor. So again, depending on the monitor size, again, you can stretch this out onto your monitor and see a lot more real estate in here. But it's maximized the entire viewpoint. So from this perspective, I may have lost my menu buttons. I may have lost my ability to navigate back through the system, but you can always come in here and click this collapse when you're done manipulating your advanced schedule to then come back and get your regular interface with your menus and drop downs that I may need to navigate to. So the first thing we want to talk about is, again, this idea of creating a job timeline. So the purpose of advanced schedule is really to kind of plan ahead how this work is going to be broken down into different phases and how we're able to manipulate those timelines through different resources, through different logics as far as, work days and visibility. So I'm going to jump in here on a brand new job that I have created. And you can see here, there's my placeholder work order that we started with. It's a blank line inside my advanced schedule that I can now start to work with. And typically when we jump into the advanced schedule, this job select screen will typically be blank. And if you're coming from a job, let's say our T180568R, it will select that job automatically. If we don't have a job selected, I can pick that from the list to be the job visibility that I see. And typically, when I jump into this screen now, it's going to automatically select that first work order in my list. So at this point, I have my work order screen in here, and I'm simply going to put in a duration of 1 and tab off that field to generate a placeholder on my job calendar. So in here, you'll see that as soon as I put in 1 and I tabbed off, it automatically filled in a start and end date for me. It defaulted the description of my work order to the work order number, and it put a little green block on my timeline view. Now, inside the advanced calendar, you have 2 sections. You have your filters and sorts that are based on a number of different columns in the system. And you also have your timeline view, which I can drag over from a visibility perspective to see as much or as little of that calendar as I want. And in here, I have a quick snap to. So if I want to drag this all the way over to one side, you simply click that little window and it drags that over to the far left, to the far right, or centered based on which element I click on in my timeline. Now, for the time being, what I need to do now is I want to come in here and I want to relabel my work order. Now, one of the areas that people, again, struggled with on the original schedule is in here, I may have 15 different appointments that are spanning a couple of different months. And I don't want to have to navigate this little scroll bar here to find the element that I'm looking for quickly. So now at the beginning, where you see the sequence number at the beginning, if you double click on that sequence number, it will automatically center your timeline screen around that specific element. So at this point in time, if I want to jump back to seeing where that appointment was scheduled, double click, and now it's recentered on the right-hand side of my work order details. Now, of course, anyone looking at this timeline, including a customer, has no idea what WO0605 is. So let's give it a description that I can now view on my timeline. So we're going to come in here and we're going to relabel this Demo the Basement. And you can see that I've already been practicing typing this in because my browser memorized that for me. So in here, you'll notice on the far right-hand side, this panel looks very similar to what you would normally see when you're scheduling an appointment on the monthly, weekly, or daily calendar. Now, what's changed since the old advanced schedule was released is we've added all of the elements into the advanced schedule that you never had before. For instance, the ability to attach a work order as a PDF, the ability to toggle on and off if I want this element to send a notification via email. And I now have the ability to complete a task directly on the advanced schedule itself. And then, of course, all these other fields in here, you'll see, give us the ability to assign our resources. And for those of you who are not familiar with what a predecessor and a successor are, that's the ability to link two phases together. A predecessor would be something that happens before the activity that I'm currently on, and a successor is something that happens after, logically, the activity that I'm currently selecting. The lag time is the ability to measure the distance between two activities. So as an example, if I had to order some custom cabinets and I knew that they weren't going to be delivered for 14 days, I may have an order element that's on my timeline, and I may have a delivery element that's on my timeline, and the distance between those may be 14 days. Now at this point, once I have the basic information that I want, I'm going to simply click Save in here. It's going to update my calendar, and you can now see that the wording Demo the Basement is now on my timeline. Now, one of the things that we changed in version 2.0 is before you used to have to come over here and type in the duration. So I wanted to change it. I'd have to change it to say 2. I would tab off. It would extend my element, but it may extend it in the wrong direction. So now, if I go and hover over my element, you'll see that when I hover over the center, my cursor changes to a move. I can move the element anywhere that I want. And this red line that you see coming down the center signifies today's date. So in here, I can always find where my current date and time is using this red line. And if I grab the beginning part, you see that my cursor now changes to an extend. I can come in here and extend the duration of the appointment. If I drag it forward, it actually moves my element to a future date and time. So I can drag, drop, extend, move, all without having to touch the beginning part of the screen to manipulate those timelines. So I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to move this back into our April 16th. And you can see in here, I've actually dragged the element over top of a weekend. Now, the message that comes up when I drag this element over is basically telling me that you're trying to book something over what we consider a non-workday. And you may be asking yourself, Ryan, where do I define this non-workday element? And so in the company settings, you will find a section in there under the jobs where you can define in a scheduling tab. Let me just actually take us there. I'm going to collapse this. I'm going to open up another tab. And so inside our company settings, I can come in there and I can define our business work days and I can define our business work hours. So based on that information, the system will know if I want to come in here and restrict non-work days now. So you see there's a checkbox at the top. I can choose to have that prompt turn on, or I can choose to have that prompt turned off. It's up to me. I'm going to come here, I'm going to bring back my element here to our 16th. And so one of the other things that we added in the system, again, this goes back to this idea of if you're not using work orders, what if I want to create, a number of different phases in the system? You'll now notice there's an add button at the top. This allows us to now come in here and add either an additional work order or the same work order with a different description. So now I'm going to say remove baseboard. I'm going to have that element created. So in here, I have that element created. If you notice that your element hasn't appeared, you can just click this refresh button at the top, and it'll bring our element now into our dashboard. Now, By default, it'll always put it, if I don't change the date, it'll always put it to the current date and time. So you can see now it's moved this over into today's date. I want to come in here and drag this closer to our element in here. Now, if you recall before when I was talking a little bit about the predecessors and successors, if I want to make sure that this remove baseboard never comes before this demo, you can see when I highlight over these elements now, there are blue circles that appear on either side. This allows me to now drag a predecessor or a successor into my next element. So now, again, without having to come down here, click the drop down, find the element I'm looking for, click save, we've now reduced the amount of clicks completely. It's all drag and drop. Now, the distance that it pushed these two elements apart has to do with that lag time. So if I want my elements to be closer together, I can reduce the lag time, and it basically will bring those two elements together on my screen. Now, I'm not going to sit here and have you watch me type all these elements. So much like a cooking show, I'm going to jump to a job that already has these elements defined. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the flexibilities that we have in our job timeline now. So in this far right-hand side of the screen, again, to the naked eye, it may look very similar to the old screen that we saw in version 1. However, there is a lot more flexibility in how we can use this beginning portion of our screen. For example, this resources element in here allows me to choose whether I want to include elements in that right-hand side or just completely hide them altogether. And I know in version 1, you could essentially drag and drop these so that they almost disappeared, but they were still there. This now gives us the ability to have the flexibility to change what I want to see as an end user and manipulate how that side screen is processed. What you may also notice is the 3 elements that I unchecked are new to the left-hand side. So one of the big requests that we had on the advanced scheduling was being able to see the estimated labor associated to our work orders. And for those of you who are not familiar with what I'm talking about, inside a work order, there is the ability to define how long we think this work will take. So this hours box in here now links directly to the work hours on our timeline screen. What does this mean for people using the advanced scheduling? If you're bringing in an Xactimate estimate and there are estimated labor hours, that will now link to this work hours screen. So I can see, while I'm planning this timeline out, how long I should allot for this activity to be done on my advanced schedule. This predecessor column allows us to see the increments of how the predecessors are aligned. So what I mean by that is the first element basically has a 0 counter. My next element has a 1, and it tells me incrementally through our logic where these are linked in our sequence. I may have a number of different logic streams that are all running simultaneously. Maybe this is our crew that's on site. This is my plumbing sub who's linked to my electrical sub, who's linked to my subfloor, and I can have these different logic streams all play out in my one timeline. In addition to this, once we get the timeline established, I now have the ability to use any of these columns to say, just show me my ACT category. And everything else will crunch together and show me just what we're doing for that category. And keep in mind that the categories, although in my example right here, although they are Xactimate related, there's nothing stopping you from creating your own categories in the system. And again, coming back to my job timeline in here, if I come to the job section and I go down into the job types, inside the web system and even inside the desktop system, there is the ability for you to go in and define your own categories selectors by clicking that Edit Job Types box in the system. So in here, if I jump into one of my categories, you'll see in here I can just simply type in a category and it will add it as one of my default selectors for my work order within that job type. In addition to this, I can also not only sort those columns, but I can organize them based on start and end date, or any of these columns. By clicking the hierarchy here at the top, I can sort these incrementally, ascending or descending by any column that I want, allowing me again to come in here and manipulate what visually I can see on this screen through that predecessor and successor, or even through our job timelines. And as I'm coming in here and building these activities, if I want to change a sequence to, let's say, I want to move this up to be sequence 6, I can simply change the element and it will realign those elements in my list to be by incremental sequence, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So there's a lot of flexibility on the left-hand side that just gives the end user more power to be able to manipulate this timeline in a number of different ways. And speaking about manipulation, if I wanted to come in here and click on visibility, if I want certain elements that are hidden, maybe they're just an FYI for me, maybe I don't want the customer to see those elements, if you click on the eye icon and then you uncheck the visibility again, it removes those elements from my advanced scheduling. So again, I can come in here and decide the visibility of what I want the end user to see within the timeline itself as well. And even though I have the full screen to look at, for some customers, it may be difficult to view in this format as far as being able to see the entire timeline at a glance. So there are a number of different visibilities that you can now zoom in and out of. So let's double click on our first element in here to take us back into where we started. And so this first one we call the week detail full zoom. It gives you a synopsis of the top between the week period. It tells you what days and the dates that those fall into. And as I go one level up, it now visibly shows me the entire week with dates. And if I go another level up, it then shows me 4 weeks at a time, or an entire month period. And if I scroll one level up again, it shows me the entire month in a block. And one level up again will now show me the quarter. And one level up again will show me the entire year. So again, may not need to use all of those visibility restrictions, but it does give us the ability to contour how much I see in a specific viewpoint. Now, in here as well, I also wanted to talk about memorizing sequences. Anyone who used the advanced schedule before will know if I came in here and I started to organize my work order sequence and then I left the screen and came back, it wouldn't memorize that sequence for us. Now, anything I change on those elements, when I come back in, it will memorize those element defaults for us. So in here, if I come in, I'm just going to close out of this. I'm going to come back into my advanced schedule. Now, granted, I'm on the original job, so it started me there first. We're going to toggle the job we just came from. And you can now see that it memorized the positioning of that element in the system based on how I left the screen. So in here, everything you do, from a sort to a grouping to a resorting of our work order sequence, it's going to memorize those elements in the system for us, so I don't have to continuously change them every time I come back in. Now, in here as well, I'll talk a little bit about the attendees. So yes, we have the ability to come in here and assign attendees. The way the notification system works is that if I assign an attendee to my element in the system, and I schedule this to go out, or I complete this by clicking save, if that attendee has an email address in our system, it will send them a notification of the date and time of this appointment. If I do not want this to go out until I have finished my timeline, our suggestion is to leave the attendees blank and then fill them in when you're ready to send that information out. Now, although there is a delete button in here, what this actually means is it's only deleting the scheduled placeholder. It is not deleting the work order. So you do not have to worry about coming in here and deleting a phase, changing a phase, adding phases in. It will not duplicate work orders. It will not triplicate work orders. It will not delete work orders. This only pertains and affects the scheduling elements in the system. Now, in here, I'm going to jump back into my PowerPoint presentation and talk a little bit about what's coming on the advanced scheduling side as it pertains to integration. And again, I will be sending this list out, so I'm not going to go through. Obviously, we covered a lot of these things in the actual presentation itself. Actually, the one element that I just realized I did not cover was the new hover element, and I'm sure you guys saw that while I was going through and leaving my mouse cursor on the different elements in the system. This hover over visibility will actually work on both sides of our advanced scheduling and will give us all the details that we'd normally see on the schedule: our subject, our number, customer name, the status, our resources, and the start and end date of each of those activities. I knew there was a reason to have that bullet point list there for us. So the next thing I want to talk about is the integration with Contractor Connections Job Track. Now, again, some of you may not know what this system is, so I'll just give you a really quick overview that Crawford, at the end of last summer, decided they were going to create their own system to track milestones and job targets. Again, this system currently links to Exact Analysis, and being released this spring, we will also have our integration finished to Job Track as well. Now, the elements that we're actually linking to have a lot to do with those milestones, what Crawford calls milestones and what we call different phases inside of PSA. So these phases, again, you can see in this screenshot here, we can link to things like our cabinetry, our demolition, our drywalling. And from Crawford's perspective, what they want to capture from us is the proposed start and end time. And you can see there's a little star in here that says required. These are things that if you are on the Crawford program that you will be held to an expectation of to getting this information filled in. And once a milestone is added, it will then sync those details between Job Track and our advanced schedule so that we can see the elements mirroring on both sides. So I can come in here and take a look at what we have set up for each phase, both the target start and completion. And as I mentioned, the release of this update is due out this spring. And so we'll keep everyone up to date on that. And obviously, much like a lot of our integrations, we want to get feedback from the users who are on these programs, who are using the system, to say, how can we make this integration better? Now, one of the elements that we did not cover in the presentation today has a lot to do with the printout options. Again, our focus, and at least initially, was to make advanced scheduling not only usable, but highly efficient. And we really wanted to focus on all the elements that people had been struggling with in the past. And one of the things that unfortunately did not get completed before its release was the updated printout options. And again, from this perspective, we really want to know from the feedback from our users, people that are actually building these timelines, not only what does your team want to see, but what does the customer want to see when these get printed out? And Right now we have a single printout option that basically just takes a screenshot of the system when you go to print it out. But there are probably ways that we can alter or change that printout in the system if we want to make it better, and more specifically, if we want to have different visibility set up depending on who's looking at that timeline in the system. Now, I know that covered my 30 minutes of course presentation. Hopefully, I was able to cover all the things that we've updated in our advanced schedule today. I'm going to jump really quickly to our questions. And the first question is, can you enlarge your screen? Tough to view. Oh, I wish I would have seen that before, Carrie. I apologize. But yes, so from a perspective of visibility, at least in the system, yes, I was using a very large monitor, so I apologize if that was tiny for one to see. Hopefully the expand did give us a little bit more detail to work with. A next question that comes in from Heidi: I do not have work orders on my screen or advanced scheduling. Is this an additional cost? It is not an additional cost. It is part of the web job management system. It is a visibility restriction. So if you do not see the schedule and you do not see the advanced schedule, one of two things may be possible. So the first thing in here is if you're using the desktop schedule in PSA, you cannot use the web schedule in PSA. It is one or the other. The second thing is that if you are not using the desktop schedule and you want the web schedule and advanced schedule turned on, just simply contact our support team and they can assist you in getting that connected to your profile. The next question: will the print feature be fixed in the new release? Previously, the print would be view would be a fixed signet view and not the entire schedule. Beneficial to print the lab's landscape view of the schedule. So yes, Taylor, basically the current print function was not updated. However, it is something that we are working on and intend to get out shortly. But would love to hear feedback, from your team or anyone who's on this call as far as, typically how do we want this presentation style to be viewed? Just, kind of going through what we went through on the development side. Sometimes it's hard to see a schedule that may span a month or 2 months in a single page and still be viewable. So part of what we're struggling with on the printout side is how do we distribute that information so it's very easily viewed, both from a contractor perspective and from a customer perspective, and maybe we set up a few different print styles to accommodate those different users. I had a question in here from Jay. I was late, perhaps you mentioned this, but when will this be released? And will this video be saved for PSA web staff to view? So yes, Jay, this recording will be made available next week, probably sometime, if not sooner. As far as the release of this, we were actually just waiting for after the virtual showcase to actually push the release out. So everything I showed you is working, is ready to go for release. We're just going to be waiting for the next release to go live. All right, so I'm coming really close to the end of my time. I'm going to take another question in here. Do the assignments sync to the Outlook calendar when adding attendees? So for the first part of that question, Carrie, when you are creating appointments on the advanced schedule, based on those attendees that we looked at, if your attendee, again, is associated to your Outlook, this is going to send a generic calendar appointment to your email, much like the regular schedule. At that point, you would still have to accept it in order for it to add into your calendar. And the next question is, can you see your schedule for the whole department for a particular week, or is it only each particular job? So from the advanced schedule, it's just showing us a particular job. But obviously, if I wanted to view this information on our calendar, you can use the monthly, weekly, and daily calendar to sort by specific departments, to sort by specific attendees, or to sort by a specific location or job. And so in here, again, if I want to see what's going on for the month, again, there is a lot of information coming on the screen, but we have made advancements to the monthly and weekly calendars to make it a little bit easier to see those job timelines. All right. So if there are any additional questions that I did not cover in our presentation, again, please feel free to send those to us. Our next session will be starting at 11:45, and I don't believe it is on, oh, it is on Smart Tech Mobile. Oh, good, I got that correct. So it will be on the proven Smart Tech Mobile and covering the next level of mobile evolution. Thank you all for attending this morning's session. We look forward to seeing you in the next one.